No law in the arena. A pagan theory of sexuality. 1. Introduction. The horses of passion. At the end of the Christian millennium and the century of Freud, sex is still shrouded in mystery. A question mark hangs over every important sexual issue. Despite bitter public controversy and heated private debate, we have no answers. Indeed, we have barely begun to formulate the questions accurately. Sex, I have argued in my prior books, is animality and artifice, a dynamic interplay of nature and culture. To study it, one must weigh the testimony of art and draw on all the scholarly resources of the social and natural sciences. In my opinion, the many schools of modern psychology, whose roots were in the late 19th century, reached their height in the eclectic 1960s, which fused widely diverse theories and practices, from Freudian verbal analysis to Reichian body manipulation. In that decade in America, Western science and Asian Hinduism momentarily came together, but the brilliant insights gained from this encounter were experienced by isolated individuals and dissipated into the general culture. The psychedelic 60s left their imprint in images and music more than in books. For the last 25 years, sex theory has been in a state of chaos. Single-issue activism turned into fanaticism on both the left and right. Understanding of eroticism has actually regressed, as ideology has become paramount. The major conceptual breakthrough of the 60s was its romantic movement back toward nature, the awesome star-studded panorama dwarfing social conventions and forms. The 60s flower power view of nature had too much Rousseauist benevolence, but it was more right than wrong. Organicism is the true deconstruction. With the failure or reluctance of 60s visionaries to enter the professions or mainstream politics, the 70s suffered from an intellectual vacuum, which was filled by a narrow, blinkered social constructionism, the simplistic behaviorist belief that nature does not exist, that everything we are comes from social conditioning. Social constructionism was a crude distortion of the vast 60s cosmic vision. It was promulgated for sectarian political purposes by three groups. First, the new 70s breed of Stalinist feminists tried, in the abortion crusade, to wipe out all reference to nature or religion, a misconceived strategy that backfired and simply strengthened the pro-life opposition. Second, ambitious literature academics, ignorant of science, used esoteric, language-based, social constructionist French theory to advance their careers after the collapse of the academic job market in the 70s recession. Third, gay activists, after the identification of AIDS in the early 80s, used fascist tactics to stop public discussion of it in anything but political terms, as if disease occurred in people's prejudices rather than in the suffering body. But what AIDS shows us is nature itself, risen up with terrible force to mock our delusions of knowledge and control. AIDS, above all, forces nature back onto the agenda of sex theory. Unfortunately, for the shallow ideology of current feminism and gay liberation, whose ultimate aims I support, this means that procreation must be dealt with much more fully and honestly than has been done before. The avoidance of that issue by the left has simply ceded it to and helped the rise of the right, which frames the argument in moral or rather Judeo-Christian terms. For me, the ultimate power in the universe is nature, not God, whose existence I can understand only as depersonalized vital energy. But as I have repeatedly said, merely because nature is supreme does not mean we must yield to it. I take the late Romantic view that everything great in human history has been achieved in defiance of nature. Law, art, and technology are defense mechanisms, Apollonian lines drawn against the Dionysian turbulence of nature. Melville's Captain Ahab, crippled and scarred, shaking his fist at the stormy heavens, symbolizes the rebellion of imagination against fate. There is a sex problem in the West because of Judeo-Christianity's ambivalence toward nature, the fallen realm of matter brought into being by a perfect transcendent deity. From its first book on, the Bible links sex to reproduction and condemns, as perverted, all male sexual activities, such as sodomy or onanism. that are wasteful of semen. Recent claims by gay activists that there is no explicit prohibition of homosexuality in the Old Testament, or that it is simply one of many defunct ritual formulas, or that God is love, which applies primarily to the New Testament and only to agape and caritas, not eros, beg the question in a foolish and reckless manner. Procreation, not fear or bias, underlies the Christian opposition to homosexuality. Fundamentalist reading of the Bible is far from passé. On the contrary, religious faith, in particular evangelical Protestantism and Roman Catholicism, is spreading around the world. The goals and reputation of progressive politics have been harmed by the juvenile arrogance of the liberal establishment toward institutional religion, which may oppress by rules, but which is also a repository of spiritual experience, as well as folk wisdom about life, far more truthful than anything in French post-structuralism. What I propose is an argument based on another Western tradition, the Greco-Roman or Pagan, which was equal to the Judeo-Christian in the formation of our culture. Feminists and gay activists must stop their self-destructive habit of jeering at the church and trying to twist it to their own purposes. We must concentrate instead on winning recognition of the pagan line as a counter-tradition whose major contributions have been science and art, and whose philosophy of sexuality is both broader and subtler than the Judeo-Christian. It is to Athens and Rome that we also trace our political systems. The framers of American democracy were not conventional Christians, but Enlightenment deists who invoked a cross-cultural creator. It is no coincidence that the principal monumental architecture of our national capital is pagan. Even in classical antiquity, homosexuality was controversial, and despite the exaggerated claims of today's partisans, there was no period or place where it flourished in complete freedom from moral opprobrium. However, the urban centers of the ancient Mediterranean were magnets for prostitution, as well as male homosexuality. Indeed, in my view, development of a sexual underworld may be intrinsic to urbanization as a worldwide phenomenon, a process that can be checked only by ruthless repression by church or state. There are remarkably similar patterns in erotic behavior, as identity overlaps identity in the intensified space and pace of cities. Whether rampant open homosexuality is or is not a symptom of social decadence remains one of the issues that must be fairly discussed without hysterical charges of homophobia in the new age of sex theory. I am ready to defend both homosexuality and decadence, since I look at history from the perspective of art, not morality. For me, civilization is art, and art is the highest record of humanity. One day, when we represent ourselves to inhabitants of distant galaxies, it will be by our art that we will want to be known. Therefore, anything that contributes to art must be nurtured and preserved. What seems irrefutable from my studies is that male homosexuality is intricately intertwined with art, for reasons we have yet to determine. The Greeks invented not only the major genres of literature and the disciplines of philosophy, but organized athletics in their mathematics-based track and field form. Dramatic competition is built into the agonistic plot structure of Greek tragedy, as well as the oratorical Western mode of legal argumentation. I want to transfer that rhythmic choreography of opposition into sex theory. Late 20th century America has more in common with imperial Rome than with classical Athens, and so it is to the Hellenized Roman world that I would look for pagan models. We need new living myths. The current discourse about sex is too genteel. Freud's severe, conflict-based system has lost popularity to a casual, sentimental style of user-friendly psychological counseling that I find typically Protestant, in the glad-handing Chamber of Commerce way. The operatic perversions of Krafft-Ebing and the unsettling daemonism of Ferenczi are completely gone. Yet sex war remains, and is likely to be our permanent condition. Competition and conflict are operating at every level of even our cooperative ventures, at work or at home. Our dream life itself, as Freud has shown, is both power play and passion play. In war, there can also be honor, the code of aristocratic chivalry applied by medieval knights, chevalier, horsemen, to battlefield, court, and bedchamber. If women want freedom and equality, They must learn the rules of the game. The title of this essay comes from Ben-Hur, 1959, the Hollywood epic that depicts the explosive tension in Judea under Roman occupation. An Arab sheikh persuades the vengeful prince Judah Ben-Hur, Charlton Heston, to race his exquisite white horses at Jerusalem by promising a head-to-head showdown with the evil Roman tribune, Messala, Stephen Boyd. The sheikh says, "There is no law in the arena." Sex today occurs in the dust and clamor of the imperial circus. Private grievances are dragged into the glare of day and become meat for the masses. Plato's lofty metaphor of the charioteer, the soul subduing by cool rationality the horses of bestial passion, was brutally revised by Rome with its grandiose gladiatorial spectacles. The chaste elegance of the contemplative Delphic charioteer was inconceivable in the hurly-burly hippodromes of the Hellenistic Mediterranean. Under the Empire, as we see from the sober writings of Marcus Aurelius, the philosophical ideal of Stoic detachment became a way to survive cultural instability. Then, as now, there is no going back. Conservative paradigms deserve our respect, but also our recognition that they are nostalgic longings for a simpler and irretrievable past. Sex in our age has become gladiatorial, with male and female, gay and straight, whipping and goading each other for position. This is our lot. We must accept it and devise a simple new rulebook and training regime that puts the combatants on equal footing. Neither women nor gays should plead for special protections or preferential treatment. The arena is the social realm, marked off from nature, but ritually formalizing nature's aggressions. My libertarian position is that, in the absence of physical violence, sexual conduct cannot and must not be legislated from above, that all intrusion by authority figures into sex is totalitarian. The ultimate law of the sexual arena is personal responsibility and self-defense. We must be prepared to go it alone, without the infantilizing assurances of external supports like trauma counselors, grievance committees, and law courts. I say to women, get down in the dirt, in the realm of the senses. Fight for your territory hour by hour. Take your blows like men. I exalt the pagan personae of athlete and warrior who belong to shame rather than guilt culture, and whose ethic is candor, discipline, vigilance, and valor.